Played before a sold-out audience in 2012. He released his first book, Words Never Spoken, a memoir. In 2015, it was followed by the sequel, One Thing for Certain, Two Things for Sure. In his third release, So Much to Say, a book of quotes was released in 2017, all of which carried 5-star ratings on Amazon. So Much to Say podcast premiered in May 2017 and is hosted by author, activist, producer, and entrepreneur TheWriter Stewart. The podcast is heard in 60 countries via Apple, Spotify, YouTube, SoundCloud, Google Play, Radio.com, Stitcher, and TuneIn, with a listenership of 86,000 to date and a combined 40,000 followers across the social media platforms. So Much to Say podcast was born out of a need to build dialogue around subjects that were sensitive but important to the LGBTQ and Black communities. The conversation centers on socially relevant topics. Hence the writer's opening catchphrase, Good Day Thinkers, through leaders, progressives, and dreamers. I'm Craig TheWriter Stewart, and this is So Much to Say. There are my thoughts and my voice on Black, white, gay, and everything in between. No topic is left untouched because the intention is to reach, teach, and heal by bridging the gap between communities, Black and white people, gay and straight men, HIV positive and negative people, gay and trans people, etc. Some of the shows over the course of the past 2 years include Will You Date Someone HIV Positive or Not? How region has helped and hurt us as a people. He was born she, and man versus man, domestic violence in gay relationships. Ladies and gentlemen, let's please welcome our mentioned speaker for this year's conference, Craig TheWriter Stewart.
One of the best parts of life is when you can admit the truth. Cyberspace is a world where one can become something he isn't, but everything he dares to be. I wasn't interested in getting attached to anyone, and I knew I wouldn't take anyone I met online seriously. I had multiple screen names to increase my chances of meeting someone attractive. The majority of the profiles noted HIV negative under status, but I knew better from the work I had done in the HIV community. I knew 1 out of 3 Black gay men was positive. The messages I found in my inbox validated me in my depression. In some strange way, they reinforced that I was worthy and deserving. My days consisted of waking up and logging on to see how many messages had been overnight. Months passed before I got honest with my therapist about what was happening with me. And before I knew it, I heard myself say, I've been having sex with people I meet online. To listen to more of Words Never Spoken, cut that out, man. Visit audible.com. One of the best parts of it. There's one more. I was involved briefly with a married man who believed he had the courage to leave his wife to be with me and to live his truth. This isn't the typical story of a married man promising to leave his wife for a secret lover. Rather, this is a story in part about a gay man who knew he was gay before he got married, but chose to marry a woman because he didn't know how to break free. Rocky and I met on a gay social media site 3 months after I returned to the East Coast to live, and just 11 months after he was married. At the time we met, he was living and working in Dubai as a contractor for the government on a military base, while his wife was stationed in Tallahassee, Florida, where they had a home. In one of the first messages he sent me, Rocky shared that he was married, but that he had regrets. He explained that he had come out to his mother and siblings when he was 18 years old. He said, to listen to more of One Thing for Certain, Two Things for Sure, our memoir continued, visit audible.com.
Good day, thinkers, thought leaders, progressives, and dreamers. How you guys feeling? All right, I said good day, thinkers, thought leaders, progressives, and dreamers. How you guys feeling? All right. My name is Craig Stewart. I'm originally from Baltimore, Maryland. a graduate of Hampton University. I heard you say that earlier, so I definitely wanted to shout you out. I'm a graduate of Hampton University. Yes, absolutely. I'm the host of a podcast called So Much to Say, where we talk about black shit, white shit, gay shit, and everything in between. And so we talk about everything from domestic violence and gay relationships, all the way down to gentrification. It is a free podcast, so you definitely can subscribe. We drop a new podcast every single Monday. But I'm also the author of 3 books. The first is Words Never Spoken, a memoir. The second is One Thing for Certain, 2 Things for Sure, a memoir continued. And the third book is So Much to Say, a book of quotes. And to the young guy that was on the panel earlier, I definitely wanted to start with this. I have my little iPad up here with all of the things that I wanted to say, but I was really inspired and moved to kind of add a few notes to what I wanted to say based on some of the things that I heard earlier. Can't remember which one of the guys that was here earlier that said they need the older generation or the senior generation. I can't remember what his choice of word was. The seasoned generation. Yeah, I'm a little seasoned. So he said that he needed us to show up for them. And what I want to tell you is, when I sat down to write Words Never Spoken, it was my intention to speak to and for black gay men. It was my intention to write that book for you. And even though the story transcends black gay men, it was my intention to write the book for you, to show up for you, because we haven't had a voice, because we have been muzzled, or we've been crippled by fear to live and stand in our truth. So one of the things that I would like to do is, for each of the guys that was here, I would like to give you a copy of the first book. And with that being said, I have to thank my man Tanya over here, because Tanya is the reason that I'm here today, because I actually spoke at 8 Upstate September of last year, because that man is a visionary. He's a visionary, and he gets it. And one of the ways that we get to zero is we have to reach the hearts and minds of our young people through the arts. I believe it's through the arts. And some way, somehow, he found out about my first book. I think he was at a conference in Dallas, and he found out about the book, and he convinced his executive director to purchase copies of my first book. And I think they ordered about 100 copies, and when the order came through my website, I thought it was fraud. I picked up the phone and called him and said, did you guys mean to do this? And so he worked on her, he got me there. I spoke there last year, and they kind of mentioned that there was a possibility that they would invite me to come speak here today. So again, thank you so very much for that. They actually took the first book and they created conversations with their young people. Because in the book, in the first book, I write about all of the things that shaped and changed my life, from my parents' divorce, my sister's drug addiction, my brother spent 23 years in jail, and it's my journey from dating women to dating men. My last girlfriend was in college, and the very first guy that I fell in love with was HIV positive. And so the first line of the first book is, oh, I lost it that quick. Hold on, it's gonna come to me. Season. Who has the book? Somebody bought the book. Where is it? Let me see it. The first man I developed real feelings for contracted HIV, but he found out 3 months after we met. So that's the first line of the first book. That relationship changed the trajectory of my career, and I believe it was a seminal moment in my life and in the work that I would create. It was a seminal moment in my life because that relationship was a reminder to me that HIV is real, and that it came that close to me. And I believe that it reminded me, it became an indelible mark in my brain, so that every sexual experience that I would have, I would always be conscious that that could be my reality. But then it was a seminal moment also because it really does frame all of the work that I've created. I wrote and produced a stage play called A Day in the Life. It premiered in Atlanta in 2002. The show sold out. And I was 26 years old at the time. I'm 43 now, so I am a little seasoned. So the show sold out. Tyler Perry came to the show, said the show was brilliant. On a scale from 1 to 10, he said the show was a 10, but he wouldn't touch it. because the story is told from the perspective of 6 gay characters. And I believe those 6 characters, and I write about this in the first book, but I believe that those 6 characters represent the persona that we find in the gay community. So everyone is present there, from the trans girl who believes she was born in the wrong body, the minister of music of the church that's struggling to reconcile his sexuality with his religious beliefs. We have the closeted professional, he's in a long-term relationship, but nobody knows that they're in a relationship, they're roommates. You have the character that I wrote after myself. He's neither hyper-masculine or hyper-feminine. He's right down the middle. He's just a regular black gay man who's looking for a healthy relationship. He comes from a supportive family. And then you have the straight identified, AKA DL character that doesn't believe he's gay or bisexual because he has a girlfriend or a wife.
Trey.
And so they come, he's a Trey. So these characters, they come together in a focus group. And they're brought to this group by a therapist. The therapist knows each of them. And so he brings them together with hopes that they'll learn from each other and that they'll grow in their sexuality journey. But of course, chaos happens, there's arguments, and so we flash to a day in the life of these characters. So we flash to the day that the minister of music is removed from his position as minister of music at the church because they learned that he's gay. We also flash to the day that the DL character, his girlfriend or his wife, she learns that she's HIV positive. And so at the time, like I said, I was 26 years old. This was in 2002, and so I had the support of pharmaceutical companies. That was how I was able to pay for the show. Fast forward to I did the show in 2002 twice. I did it in 2003, we did a 1-year anniversary show, and then the last production was in 2007. What I learned, and we sold out, we opened to a sold out crowd, we did 13 shows. That time I had an underwriter, an angel investor who paid for the show. Because I ran into issues with the pharmaceutical companies. Because I was noticing that the trend was moving from prevention pieces, which a day in the life is a prevention piece, and they were moving more to care. They were spending more money on care. And so again, I go back to my initial statement is, I believe that the way to get the attention of young folks, young black gay men in particular, because that's whose numbers are really through the roof, is through the arts. So shows like Pose, they're doing an incredible job. Because they get to see themselves. We need more representation. We need to see ourselves in film, in books, stage plays, web series. That's where the money needs to go. It needs to go into the arts. PSAs are great, but they're not doing the trick. Billboards are great, they're not doing the trick. You have to really stimulate the mind of these young people. And somebody said earlier that these young folks need to be at these meetings. They need to be at these planning meetings.
They really do.
They need to be at these planning meetings because they know how to reach their community. They know how to reach their community in ways that perhaps you guys do not. One of the things that I believe also is that the messaging is a bit confusing. I think that we're all called to do a particular work while we're here on this planet. And I believe that a part of what I was called to do is to bridge communities through my art, whether it's through the podcast or the plays or the books. I believe a part of what I do is, I forgot to mention I'm the showrunner for a show called The Queen's Supreme Court with T.S. Madison. I forgot to mention that. But what I try to bring to that show is smart talk. Because traditionally, if you guys have been watching the show since, when it was originally with her and Kaya, it was just shits and giggles. And excuse my language, but again, we got to meet the people where they are. But it was just shits and giggles. But what I wanted to infuse in that show was some smart talk. Because what I said to Madison was, you have this massive, massive platform. We have to use this platform to reach the people. Because not everyone that watches your show is watching CNN. They're not reading the New York Post or reading the Huffington Post. So we have to spoon feed them some of this information that we need them to know. And so again, the same is true with this HIV information, the medications, the prevention components. Like, the way to get to these people is you have to meet them where they are. And so I believe that what I was called to do is to bridge communities, because there's a severe divide between the gay and trans community, because even though we're a part of the same subculture, there's a divide. There's a divide between gay and lesbians. There's also a divide between black and white folks. We already know that. There's also a divide between HIV positive people and HIV negative people. But what I'm really interested in is the divide between black gay people and the black community. So if we're really interested in getting to zero, we really have to start talking about language, because I was called a sissy and faggot by my own people before I was ever called a nigger.
Hello.
We have to think about how words impact people. Most of us came into this community broken. And when I say came into this community, I specifically mean came into this community because I don't believe in the word lifestyle. I don't believe that being gay is a lifestyle. The word lifestyle suggests that it's a choice or it's a decision. Shopping at Whole Foods is a lifestyle. Golfing 3 days a week is a lifestyle. Sexuality, I believe, is instinctive. It's how we're wired. It's not a choice. It's not a decision. That's whether you're gay, straight, trans. I don't believe that it's a choice. But we really have to look at the way that black folks handle or mishandle the LGBTQ community. And I'm speaking generally because I know that there are black folks that have no issue with it, but generally speaking. And see, religion has helped and hurt us in a lot of ways as black people. And the divide that's present between the black gay community and the black community is present mostly because of religion. And so in 2019, you still have parents that refuse to accept their own children because of religion or the church or their pastor or what their family members or co-workers are going to think about their gay or trans child. So we really have to start thinking about that, because when you have a child that you've called sissy, or their siblings call them sissy, or their cousins call them sissy or faggot, they carry that hurt and that pain with them into this community. And they're looking for that love that they didn't get from you. I believe that is also connected to HIV, low self-esteem. I believe depression is connected to HIV as well. I wrote very candidly in my first book, so candidly that I almost didn't even know I would release it. I almost thought that I would just kind of keep it as a file on my computer. But just to give you a little background, I had lived in Atlanta for 13 years. I literally moved there 2 days after I graduated from Hampton University. And I moved there with the express purpose of writing music. That's all I thought I could do. I was 22 years old at the time. But the vision was bigger than that. I didn't know it at the time, but the vision was bigger than that. So the relationship happened with the guy that I told you about, the first guy that I fell in love with. Well, 3 years later was when I wrote A Day in the Life. While I was writing A Day in the Life, I founded a greeting card company. I forgot to mention that too. It's called Say It in the Card. I founded a greeting card company. We found our way in 7 stores. The economy shifted. Each of those stores closed up. My car was repossessed. Bank account was overdrawn $660. There were eviction notices on my door. I was starting to develop headaches, and I'm not a person that ever gets headaches. And I was staying with one of my friends, and she said, just stay here for a while. I was going through a breakup at the time. She said, just stay here for a while. You didn't anticipate any of this stuff happening. Just rest. And there was a tugging in my spirit, and I didn't understand what that was at the time. The first whisper happened in December 2010. I ignored that whisper. It kept tugging, it kept pulling. February, the second whisper. And it was simply saying to me, you need to be in LA, you need to live in LA. And it didn't make any sense to me because why would I move to LA if I was having a difficult financial time in Atlanta? And then I didn't know anybody. I knew two people in LA. So I ignored it, but then I started to pay closer attention to that whisper. I ended up moving to LA April 25th. Happy birthday. I ended up moving to LA April 25th. 3 months after I was in LA, I started writing Words Never Spoken. It became very clear why I was in LA and why the universe was pulling me to LA. I believe that book wanted to be born. And I believe the only way that it was going to happen was if I had left Atlanta, a city that I had lived in most of my adult life. Everything that I learned about being gay, HIV, I learned all of that living in Atlanta. I believe that book wanted to be born, and so I had to be in LA in a place where I was isolated long enough to just kind of get the story going. I self-published the book. I didn't have money for a PR firm. I don't have a major publishing house behind me. But I believe that these books are moving and selling themselves at this point because, one, I answered the call. I responded to the call. I was obedient to the universe, to God. And because my intention was pure. And when I started thinking about how to market the book, how to promote the book, again, I had nothing. I had just enough money to get back to the East Coast. And so I remember, is everybody here familiar with Jacked? Is there anybody here that's not familiar with Jacked? Not familiar with Jack, Daniel? You're not familiar with Jack?
I'm kidding.
Okay, so Jack is a mobile app. He tried it. But he said he's not familiar. So Jack is a mobile app, and it will show you to engage. Some call it a hookup site, some call it a dating app. But it will show you who's in close proximity of you. It's kind of like Tinder. So at the time, I created a Jacked profile because I knew that this would be my strategy for how to promote and sell the book. And at the time, you could put a hyperlink on your profile. And so my profile was very simple. It said, if you're on this app, you must watch this video. And there was a link that took you to my YouTube channel where I was reading a piece from the first book where I talked very specifically about the emptiness, the loneliness, the depression, and the lowest points of my life when I was using the internet, Adam for Adam, men for now, this is before Jack, to meet men that I did not know for the sole purpose of having sex. It was the way that I responded to my depression. I believe symptoms of depression are different for people. Some people overeat, some people spend, some people have sex. For me, I was addicted to the online connection. It wasn't the sex that I was addicted to. I was addicted to the pacification that came with, oh my God, you're this. Oh, I would love for you to just hold me. Oh, could you just... It was something about the adrenaline rush that those messages provided to my inbox, right? And so I used that app, Jacked, to promote the book. And what I would literally do is, whenever I was in a different city, I'd sit there and I'd swipe past every single profile. Because undoubtedly, if I went on their page, they would come back to my page because they could see that I had been on their page. They would read that message, they would go look at the YouTube video, and even if I wasn't in a different city, I would type in a city, scroll through the profiles, type in a zip code, scroll through the profiles, and I cannot begin to tell you how many messages I received from mostly black gay men or boys who were suffering silently from depression, who were suffering silently with the knowledge that they were HIV positive. In some instances, I was the only person that they had told through an app. Suffering because their parents had put them out of their home. They were homeless, whatever the case, and they were staying with someone in exchange for sex. So this thing about getting to zero, it's deeper than just getting information to people. It's really getting to the root of why it's so commonplace now to have raw sex. It's not just that it feels good. I think it's deeper than that. And so I started to mention earlier that I think that some of the messaging is mixed. And I think that some of our young folks are a bit confused by the messaging. Because on one hand we say, I think we've done such an incredible job. Let me start there. We've done such an incredible job of affirming those that are living with the virus, of reminding those living with the virus that there is life after HIV. You can flourish, you can prosper, you can, continue on. But I think we've neglected to affirm those that are negative. We have to give them reason to celebrate and reason to remain negative.
Right.
I posted on my social media back in October. I had been tested for HIV back in October. And I posted my negative results on my social media and I received some backlash. I've received messages from people that I don't know. And then even a couple people in my personal life will call and say, why would you post that on there? What are you, bragging? And I said, bragging? What? Bragging? So there's a divide there, and I can only tell you what my experience has been. I don't proclaim to have all of the answers, but for me, the reason that I posted it had nothing to do with bragging, but it was for those young boys coming behind me that happened to follow my social media. I wanted them to know that HIV is not necessarily part and parcel of being gay. Because that very first guy that I fell in love with that was HIV, that found out he was HIV positive 2 months after we met, he was under the impression that at some point he would become HIV positive. And he said to me, well, haven't we all thought that at some point you would become HIV positive? And I remember telling him, no, I've never thought that. So it goes back again to the black community, the black church, and the black family, and what we're convincing or conditioning our young LGBTQ people to believe and think of themselves. I think another thing that we need to do, and this is where the money and the pharmaceutical companies come in, I think we need to spend some of that money educating our young people on the rich black gay history from which they come. Because many of them have no idea who Bayard Rustin is or Essex Hemphill, these people. They have no idea who these people are, and I believe that the more you begin to know about this rich gay history from which you come, the taller you'll stand. There's some work we have to do. And again, it's not just about mobile testing centers that you put out in front of these nightclubs. There's work that we have to do, and it has more to do with these mobile testing vans that you put outside of these nightclubs. And I'm not at all knocking those efforts. What I'm saying is it's deeper than that. It's about how we come into this community viewing ourselves. So many of us come into this community broken, emotionally bruised, fractured by those words like sissy, fag, and punk. And I love women. I love black women. I have a particular affinity for black women because my mother is black,
Right.
my sister, my aunts.
Right.
And so we need you. We need black women because you're either going to be an ally or not. But we can't. The word faggot is just as dangerous as the word nigger. And so if, as black people, we don't want to be called nigger, we certainly don't want to be called faggot or sissy. And we see it all the time on these reality shows. There's the gay best friend to one of these women on one of these reality shows. And the moment there's an argument, the first word or weapon that they use is you woman, or you girl, you sissy, you know. So we have to think about that. And then that leads me to our promoters, these club promoters, and these pride promoters who book these people. And then we turn around and pay to see these people. So for me, I sometimes wonder, why do we support folk that don't like us? Is there some sort of a emotional masochism? I don't know. So, I think about my journey through this community, and I was of the belief at one point that as long as I didn't participate in bathhouses, sex parties, if I avoided all those things, that I was fine, right? And so I don't have experiences with bathhouses and sex parties. My experience was more mine. I used to think that was the lesser of the evils, because I was at home. I was at my house. Right? You know how we do. We justify our dysfunction. I'm not like them. I don't go. They came to my house. And then I even justified it even further. But they weren't fucking me. I was fucking them. So it wasn't as bad. But there was a young guy. I think he was older than me, but he's since passed. There was a guy who was in my stage play. He played the therapist. His name was Paris Ely. You guys know Paris Ely? Paris Ely. And he auditioned for my show as a therapist. And that single conversation changed my life. Just as much as that first relationship that I told you guys about. Because up until the point that I met Paris, I was of the belief, like I said, that if I didn't go to bathhouses or go to the park and do these things in the park, then I was good. But he shared with me how he contracted the virus. And he became very public about it, and he would speak about it. But he shared with me that he was of the belief that the person that he was involved with sexually, that it was a monogamous relationship. I had never considered that. I was 26 at the time. I had never considered that. And I believe that everything happens for a reason. I believe everything happens when and as it should. And I believe that he was another moment in my life that kind of galvanized the way that I would move through this community, the way that I would create for this community. But I think that the work really begins with the Black community and the Black gay community and the Black community. This healing that has to happen there, because there's all this talk about Black Lives Matter until it's a gay or trans person that's killed or battered. So I remember when my mom used to have an assisted living business, but prior to it being an assisted living business, it was a home for people living with HIV. So I was in high school at the time, so this was in between 90 and 94, I think it was like 92. And I remember the first patient, or client, I should say, not patient, the first client that moved in, he was positive, of course, and I remember, I think I was probably like 16, maybe, something like that. And I remember being nervous about shaking his hand. And I believe that that was another seminal moment in my life in the work that I would do. Because ironically, fast forward maybe 8 or 9 years after that, here I was in love with someone that was positive, and it completely changed my perspective. Completely changed my perspective. But as I kind of touched on it earlier, but I believe that the messaging that we're giving to our young people, it can sometimes be confusing for them, because we have to make them aware that people still do die. And I think that we've given them this narrative that, oh, if you just take your medication, you're going to be fine. And I think they have this kind of nonchalant, cavalier approach to unprotected sex, to raw sex. Because they're just thinking, well, as long as I take my medication, I'm okay. So again, I think we really have to impress upon them the importance of remaining negative and celebrating that. And celebrating it. So if there are any questions, I'd be glad to take any questions. Or make any comments if you have any comments. Sure. How did my female significant? Oh, well, I didn't come out to her. My last girlfriend was in college, but I actually didn't. So I graduated in '98. So I actually did not have my first experience until I was 22, and this was in '98, but it was after I moved to Atlanta.
Well, then let me rephrase my question. For the female that you had a straight male, what was their response to it when you came out to them as you were gay?
So the first person that I told was a good friend of mine, and when I told her, she cried. And she said to me, "No, you can't be gay, you're one of the good ones. Just want to get married and have kids." And I believe that part of the reason it's difficult for so many men, without exception of race, I think it's difficult for so many, especially with men of color, because we don't give them the permission. We don't give them permission to just be who they are. And so I think that so many men live on the periphery of the gay and straight world, oftentimes bobbing and weaving between the two. And so she said to me, you can't be gay, I think this is just a phase. And then I think for some, they really do try to honor you and be what you want them to be. Whether it's a close friend, whether it's your mom, because, even with my second book, I write about a relationship that I have with a married guy. He came out to his family at 18, but he got married at 33 to a woman. Met me a year into the marriage and was confused. Didn't know if he wanted to stay in the marriage. But he was trying to satisfy his mom. And so I just think that we have to give people the latitude to be who they are. And one of the things that I learned about my experience with him in writing the second book also, some of these men that are involved with women, they're not involved with them just because they're interested in being deceptive. I think on the surface, we all think that it's about them being deceptive and just wanting their cake and eat it too. You know the things that we say. It's not always about that. What I learned is some of these men are really trying to uphold that commitment that they've made to that woman. And to those, in some instances, they have children. They try, because there was a guy. This is when I was still promoting the book on Jack. I came off of Jack once they took that hyperlink off. I could no longer promote over this. I came off of it. But I remember having a conversation with a guy in Tupelo, Mississippi. I'm gonna take this off. I'm tired of leaning over.
Yeah.
He lived in Tupelo, Mississippi. He had been married for 25 years. 3 children. 10 of those 25 years, he was involved with a man. And he and I would talk on the app, and he was like, I really want to get this book, but I don't know where I would send it. I don't know how I would read it. And then he said to me that the reason that he refuses to leave his marriage, because the guy that he was involved with gave him an ultimatum at some point. He said, listen, it's been 10 years, you're either gonna leave or I'm done. And so he didn't leave his marriage, and so this guy, he said he spiraled, and he went on his sex binge because he was heartbroken that this man had left him. But the reason that he wouldn't leave is because he said, my children believe I hung the moon. They thought so much of him. And he didn't want to disturb his family. He didn't want to break up his family in that way. And so he was staying. So for some of them, they believe that the honorable thing to do is to stay in this relationship. You got a question?
Tori wanted me to ask.
So Tori, why did you want to ask me?
I wanted the gay black man to ask.
Oh, okay. Well, I know it's from you now, though, but go ahead. Come on, gay black man.
The gay black man to ask. Where does like treatment as prevention and pre-exposure prophylaxis fit in with the communication?
Wait, say that again for me.
So where does PrEP, where does treatment fit into the safer sex conversation? Right? Is that it?
Well, for me, I think that what's astonishing to me is that there's so many people who have no idea what PrEP is. One of my concerns with PrEP, and I've been very vocal about it, I did a whole podcast called Would You Date Someone HIV Positive? I had Dr. David Malbranch on the show, and I had a gentleman who wanted to remain anonymous, and he said that he refused to date someone HIV positive because he had been married to a guy who was positive, and he said after a few condoms breaking, he just didn't want to run the risk again, run the risk with his words. And so, for me, there's so many people who have no clue what PrEP even is. So I think that there's, again, a disconnect from the community-based organizations and the community. And I think, again, the way we have to start having these conversations about sex sooner. You see a lot of parents aren't having the conversation with their children because they think that if they're opening up the conversation that they're giving them permission or license to have sex. So I think some way, somehow, we need to tie it into school systems. It needs to be tied, again, into the arts. I was a substitute teacher before I was doing this full time, which was probably 2 years ago. And all day long I said to the kids, put your phone down. They're on these phones. The way to get to them is through these phones, through these iPads. It's through these web series that they're watching. It's through Snapchat. It's through those things. And I think we have to be a lot more creative with how we're getting information about PrEP because it's not just enough to just say use condoms. But then the other thing about mixed messaging, there's so many people who are using PrEP incorrectly. They're using it as if it's a vaccine, and they're not using it in conjunction with other safe practices. The conversation that I've had with so many people is, well, I'm on PrEP. Without any regard to any other STDs or STIs, oh, I'm on PrEP, you know? And so, I don't know if we just need to rehaul the entire thing and start from scratch, but there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect. But I just personally think, as an artist, I think the way to get to our young people is through the work. I think that Pose is groundbreaking, and I mentioned this earlier, because folk in your, like these 20-some-year-old people, young people, they weren't there to see folk dying every other day. Folks scared to answer the phone because you don't know who to die now. You know what I mean? But Pose has done an incredible job of documenting it while entertaining it. While entertaining the audience. They've wrapped it into the ball scene. You know what I mean? We have to figure out a way to get to them, what interests them, and weave it in that way. But I was so impressed with the way that because I even learned some things watching Pose. And I thought I was pretty knowledgeable. You know, I think they do such an incredible job, especially I'm just assuming you guys have seen the show, but especially the scene where Blanca and Pray Tell went to upstate New York or wherever it was, where was it? Yes, where the young people who had passed away from the virus, they didn't have family members to claim their bodies, and so they were just putting their bodies in landfills. And I think they need to see that kind of stuff. Because the new face of HIV doesn't look like the old face. And so they're not scared enough. They're not scared enough. Did you have?
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
Well, I was thinking about something last night, and you said something about self-esteem. And I was thinking about the conversation we were having, and we were talking about the sentence, bringing people back into care. And I thought about the whole thing. The one thing they don't do is value your work. If they come to me and said, hey, I want you to do that, I want you to take this survey because I think you are worth it. I value your time, I value your opinion, so I'm gonna offer you something. But if you come to me and bargain with me like I'm a cheap off and offer me $10, you said my work is worth $10, I'm giving you 26 years of experience and all I have is $10, that means you're not valuing me as a person. I think a lot of times we walk around here with low self-esteem because nobody ever validated us. You just have us in the room and don't act like we're a person, act like we're a person. So you start validating us, making sure that you're worthy, that my time and my opinion is worth something, maybe I would have a relationship. That's how you build a relationship. But just bartering me for something for a temporary satisfaction, that's not building a relationship for me. That's taking advantage of me in that opportunity and just leaving me straight. But you're not building a relationship because you're not validating me and saying I'm worthy for asking for your opinion. So how about that? How are you going to value my work by making me asking for giving me my expertise? I think my expertise is worth something.
That's right.
I agree. You made me think about when the guy that I was dating that found out he was positive. You made me think about when he learned that he was positive. And I remember I used to try to get him to go to like different workshops. I live in Atlanta. And so there was a project at one point called AIDS Survival Project. It was like a whole weekend. And there were drug companies that were there, health professionals, people that were infected, people that were affected. And I remember trying to get him to go to those workshops with me because it was my intention to stay in the relationship. He was not having it. So he never really wanted to go because he was so worried about people thinking that he was positive. And I remember saying to him, well, they could think that I'm positive. I'm going. And he said something that changed me. He said, but the difference is you know you're not positive. And so, again, we have to be a bit more clever in how we reach the people, how we get to the people, because everybody's not going to show up at these conferences. Same is true for these organizations that offer free medication. Everybody's not going to go to those places to pick up medication. I have a friend that was working for the CDC, and his job was to go to different doctors' offices to talk to the clients to make sure that they were being treated, they felt like they were being respected and that kind of thing. And oftentimes, when he would see clients in the offices, they would shy up or they would turn their head because these were also people that he would see at the club. And they knew that he now had their information, or at least knew their status. And so we have to figure out clever ways to get to the people.
Right.
I can't say it enough. I think it's through the arts. I really do. Because there's something really special about seeing yourself on television, in a TV show, or on stage, or in a movie, or in a web series. We're the most creative people walking. When I say we, I'm talking about LGBTQ people. We're the most creative people. That's what's going to get our attention. Any other questions or comments? If I can get the money for it, with them pharmaceutical companies. If I get that money, baby, I would love to. And you know, I write about the play in my first book, and now as the book has gotten more attention, people always say, when are you going to bring this show back? Are you going to do this show? But again, the people that I was connected with, what I will say is, Agaron Pharmaceuticals, and I know the pharmaceutical companies have changed, but at the time, Agaron Pharmaceuticals was one of the supporters. Bristol Myers, Gilead, that may have been it. But, you know, the way that they started spending their dollars changed, and then the drug reps that I was connected with, they moved to different positions, or, you know, so I don't have those inroads anymore, but I would love to bring the show back. Any other questions, comments? Okay. All right, well, thank you so much for having me.